Sure. Am I dead?
Okay, Jessica, you go over and talk to Carolyn.
Okay.
And Barbara, you go talk
Depends on who
to,
you ask.
ooh, this is
I would
Matt.
probably
Will,
guess
okay,
Will.
yeah. Let's mix it up. Hi, how are you?
Well,
This is who you are today. You get to talk to Rebecca and ask only yes/no questions to figure out who you are.
Okay.
And then you have to help her figure out who she is.
Okay. So,
Okay.
yes, I would say positive reasons, others might not. But I know very little about them. Okay.
This is who you are. You can only ask yes/no questions to figure out who you are.
When do we do that?
Right now, we're already doing it. Yeah, and then you have to help other people figure out who they are.
I was giving you answers as if you were.
But I'm a
You're not sure. Okay.
my religion.
Yes.
I don't know.
Connected with the sign. No.
Okay.
No. Before that.
I at least know who yours is.
Oh, good. I know who yours is.
I
just
didn't
don't know.
completely know who hers was.
Okay, go ahead.
Am I living?
No.
Oh, we're only supposed to ask yes or no questions.
Oh,
Am
No.
I more famous now than I was?
No. Your riches were secondary.
Yes.
I'm not an athlete anymore.
Let's see if she lied to you. No, you're not a theorist.
I'm not a theorist?
No.
Well,
You'll never get it thinking that way.
well,
Somebody led you astray.
was he an actor?
Positive
Am I
reasons.
any of those things? Talk,
Am I evil?
show host, chef, or
Not what you're about to
Am I
say.
known for my
Yeah.
Yes, but, is that a yes, but?
You're not on
Yes, but, not what you're most known for? Yes, but that won't help you?
Was he a criminal?
Did
he lead an
Well,
unsavory
yeah,
life?
but-
was never convicted.
No. That's a hard question.
He was never convicted. That's great.
My opinion is
Yeah.
yes. But that's a good word to hang on to.
Oh.
Was I in the movie?
guy, no.
Okay. So,
So is my name.
you are okay.
She's an artist.
So to speak.
But you got them in.
Am I a
So,
psychiatrist?
no, male, very famous
Am
male.
No.
If you classify the Bible as such.
Was I in a
So,
movie?
probably not.
Not personally.
Am I a scientist?
Right?
Yes.
See, was I from the United States? Not the way that you mean no.
Yes.
No.
Was I from the United
She
States?
got her! Oh!
Yay!
You are, nomenclatural close.
Yes.
What? No. Yours is hard.
Can I see yours?
Because she
Ah,
can't
of
gather her
course.
to ask the right
course.
questions. Hers is hard, I think. I think yours is hard.
Am I a manufacturer? Phoebe
Is mine
Rebozo.
hard?
Strictly speaking.
Did I write a book?
The arts.
Yes.
But that won't help.
Do I want to read it?
No, you don't.
You're not sure.
I doubt it.
Am I a writer?
Nightstand.
Am I Rosie O'Donnell?
No.
Okay.
Not in books.
So, visual.
Poetry?
Yes.
Am I health focused?
Nope.
No, some sort of artist, not a painter, not a.
That's not what you're known
Right.
for.
Not known for being
You're not a
writing
poet, but
poetry.
you write.
Going down that line now.
But I could still be alive. Am I supposed to give them the answer depending on how long we've been going at this?
No.
Okay.
You would direct them to talk to someone else who maybe could give them, yeah, we would mix it up. I would make you stand up and walk around.
Possibly. A female songwriter.
Yes.
He died.
Oh,
Yes.
oh, is it him? No. She gets you.
That's right.
Um,
Did they really up on his
Is it?
face?
That's dead now? Is that what we said?
No.
Oh, alive now, okay. Female songwriters alive.
Hello.
Do I live in California?
Come in. We're playing a little game. It's called Who Am I? You get to ask yes, no questions to figure this is who you are.
Okay.
And everybody else is somebody.
Okay.
And you can only ask yes, no questions. Talk to this young man right here. He needs some help.
I've gotten mine.
Oh, you got yours. Oh, okay.
Do I write Christian songs?
The author.
You might have sung
Okay.
Mine's already been guessed. It's quite unfortunate.
Quite unfortunate.
I had a feeling as soon as you put it on, I was like, I have a feeling who this one is.
Do I do concerts?
Yes.
Okay, this is who you are. You must ask yes, no questions only to find out who you are. Yes, no, and then the other people are someone. So here's this lady right here. So you help each other. Oh, well, then don't talk to her. talk to somebody else. Okay, this is who you are. You can only ask yes, no questions to find out who you are, and everybody else is somebody too. You have to help them as well. Carolyn said they are. So she said they're homemade.
Not 6 months, no.
Can we start giving hints yet?
Not year, no.
You can.
But you would have seen it.
You can.
Not necessarily on television, but probably on the
Finally, she got it.
The medical field.
No.
Am I in the literature field?
No.
I got a hint, so I know.
Am I in politics?
No.
I would have never guessed that.
Am I dead?
No.
I would ever.
But you're very old. You should find out if you're male or female. Oh, okay. Good.
My first question cut out half the population.
Yeah, it does.
Do I like it?
You may or may not, but you sit
Do you
in
think I
there.
like it? I hope not.
This character appears more than one time this year.
Do I have a TV show?
No.
I'd say probably.
You don't know who the person is? I guess mine. Never mind. I can get yours, I'm sure, Brenda. Yes, the right question.
Okay, so,
No.
am I an actor?
No.
Actress?
No.
Am I a scientist? What are these names about?
Anything in the world, apparently.
Anything in the world. Am I a play?
Was I born before 1900?
No, they're people. They're all people.
Okay, so it's a people. So, am I a miracle? I was
An older one.
an American youth.
Did I go to the Olympics?
Not anymore, no.
All right. Who found out who they were?
Happen, and yeah, I think.
Rebecca found out who she was. Will figured out who he was. Anybody else?
Do you know who you are?
Carolyn?
Yay.
I've forgotten now. Oh, good job.
Yes. So you can take your name tag or get somebody else to if you can't reach back that
Give
far.
me a hint.
You wouldn't want to be.
That's not her. I don't even know who that is.
She's the original woman's liber. She's the one who took prayer out of the schools and all kinds of other stuff.
Maybe I should.
He's very old.
It was before your time.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
She got hers.
You got yours.
She
Yeah.
asked for a hint, and I said,
Yeah.
"You're just asking for a little respect."
Yeah.
I asked the wrong question. I asked if I sang.
Oh.
And the answer was no, of course.
No, you
Because I
don't.
played.
Yes, you played. Yes.
Okay, so did you make these goodies?
No. Welcome. So we've already tried out the first activity. The names that were on the backs of your shirts were a wide variety of people. We had business, we had music and literature, and I don't think anybody got the cat in the hat one, but I had that in there. Did you have the cat? Okay, cat in the hat. Very good. So some people from literature, characters from literature. So you could do this with all kinds of things. What I've done with it in nursing before is to put various mental health conditions on the backs of the students' backs. And so one person had to act out depression, and someone had to act out paranoia, and someone else had to be manic. And so, you know, we just did the gamut, and then they had to guess who, in this case, we let them know who they were, all right? And so then they had to get everybody else to guess them. So you can, you know, flip it around different ways. But that's always interesting, and of course it applies to different majors and areas in the university. So if I could borrow Brenda for just a minute to be my scribe. Here's the paper. I would just like to know what areas people teach in, because I don't know everyone, and I don't think we all know each other. So if you're in nursing, raise your hand just so that everybody knows who you are. Okay, so there's nursing. All right. And Will, what do you teach in? Will.
English.
English. And Matt?
Theology.
Theology. Okay. I didn't get to meet you. I'm very sorry. David?
Yeah, thoroughly. I teach TESOL.
TESOL. Okay. Aaron? Was it your name Aaron, or did I get that wrong? Aaron, what do you teach
Well, I
in?
raised my hand for nursing, but I teach at Cleveland High School, and I'm teaching a dual enrollment anatomy here.
Anatomy.
So-
Okay, so science area. Okay, good. That's helpful. So one of the things, thank you very much, Vanna. I appreciate your help. One of the things sometimes that I'll do at different points in the class is to have a student be my scribe. They can write things down, but I can keep my focus on the discussion and what I'm pulling in. So sometimes I'll have just a list of topics, but what I like to do at the beginning of class is to say, what is it from your reading or what we had last week that you still feel uncomfortable with, you're muddy, you don't have a handle on it, that we need to be sure we hit today. And so I'll have a student come and write those things on the board. And then as we're going through class, when we get to those things, I'll say, now, so-and-so, you identified that this was something that was muddy. Have I cleared that up? Yes or no? Hopefully yes. And then ask them to say, to describe that, to explain it in their own words. And then I'll cross it off. And then as we go along, then I'll talk some more, or we'll have some more discussions, and we'll discover something that David was confused about. And so I'll say, David, would you explain that to everybody to be sure they've got it? Okay, good. So we can cross off that one. So usually I would put their name next to it, whoever brought that topic up. Not that they would be the only one, because usually they overlap a lot. And so that's one way that I can keep us on track, but also they actually see that they're learning something. And it interrupts me just talking all the time because I have somebody else explain something. And that's usually pretty helpful. So let me see if this will show up. See if you recognize this. Who's that? That's me. That's me. That's you. That's a lot of other people around here. We just like to talk. And one of the things that I want to be sure that we find today is how to do things not just talking. So we don't all turn into Charlie Brown's teacher, because that would be no fun. Hi, welcome. So my objectives for today are two, and they're very simple. One is that you will try out 1 or 2 new strategies this week. Today's Monday. You probably taught some classes, but maybe not all your classes, hopefully not all. So that you will try out one new strategy this week. And the second thing is that you will share with one of your colleagues one thing from today. That way we can spread the joy. And as I tell my students, if you can explain something to someone else, chances are you'll get it a little better in your head. So first of all, I'd like to, and what I'm going to do pretty much is just demonstrate a bunch of different techniques. Some that I've used multiple times, some that I've only used a couple times, and some that I'm getting ready to try out myself because they sounded real interesting. So one of the things that I've done in the past in teaching psychiatric nursing, and of course this would work for psychology as well, or counseling, different things like that, is I've read scriptures and related them to mental health conditions. So this is from Job. See what you think. He has alienated my brothers from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My kinsmen have gone away. My friends have forgotten me. My guests and my maidservants count me a stranger. They look upon me as an alien. I summon my servant, but he does not answer, though I beg him with my very own mouth. My breath is offensive to my wife. I am loathsome to my own brothers. Even the little boys scorn me. When I appear, they ridicule me. All my intimate friends detest me. Those I love have turned against me. I am nothing but skin and bones. I have escaped with only the skin of my teeth. Now, what kind of things could we discuss with that? It sounds kind of like Eeyore, doesn't it?
What's the reference?
It's Job chapter 19, and he's responding to Bildad, one of Bildad's, I'm all over you, friend. But this is one of the areas where Job has a lot of feelings, and he shares those outright. So I think we could have a discussion about depression, and we could actually look through the chapters of Job and find out how not to respond to someone who is depressed, and use that as an exercise in learning. So what other things in scriptures, what other parts of stories or things people say could we use in different disciplines? There's a lot of sociology, of course literature, there's poetry in the Psalms, and we can relate characters and their feelings and what they do from scripture to real life, not necessarily as a devotion, although it might end up to be that, but as a part of our lesson in what we're teaching. And I actually used Job one time to teach bipolar, because he goes back and forth. And so Job has a lot of mental health conditions all rolled up into one. The other thing you can do is read from a children's book. Maybe there's a point you want to make from a children's book. Or any kind of fiction or nonfiction. Now this book I have is called They Popped My Hood and Found Gravy on the Dipstick by Todd Starnes. And in here he talks about having heart surgery. And he needed a new valve. And so I would read this to my students, and we would talk about what this means to patients with heart surgery. It's full of stuff. I have dog-eared so many corners on this book. But this is the one that I'm just going to read to you today. So we need to talk about this new heart valve, my surgeon said. We've got a couple of directions we can go, and I'm going to let you decide which kind of valve you want. My doctor handed me a few shiny pamphlets extolling the wonderful world of artificial body parts. For a moment, I thought I was in a car dealership looking to accessorize my ride. Basically, there are two kinds of heart valves, artificial and biological. The artificial valves are typically made from a graphite plastic material that has a lifespan of about 200 years. The biological valves are normally harvested from pigs. It took me about 5 seconds to decide which kind I wanted. Oh, I'm all about the pig valve, I told him. The sheer entertainment of value alone would be worth the surgery. And I thought my passion for barbecue would be complete. The pig and I would be one. Yeah, well, you might want to reconsider, my surgeon told me. Pig valves only last for about 14 years, and I'm not too sure you want to have open heart surgery every decade. Suddenly, the graphite valve didn't seem so bad after all. Besides, the doctor said that my new heart valve would outlast me. There would be some risks, though. The mechanical heart valve would require a significant change in my lifestyle. So now I'm going to talk about lifestyle changes. Or I could talk about the heart surgery. Or I could talk about hearts in general, anatomy, physiology. What kind of valves are there and what do we use them for? So there's all kinds of things I could use. It's technically his autobiography in a tongue-in-cheek kind of a way. I think you can tell that. It's not really fiction. He writes it about himself. But there are all kinds of things just in this little book. It's a crazy book that I could use to teach different kinds of science things or even feelings after surgery. He goes through a whole wealth of things. So that's another example of something you could read and pull into your discussion. Another thing that I like to do is invented dialogues. And some places in books they'll call it scripting. So what would you say if? So anybody who teaches in business or psychology, leadership, even education department, what would you say if? So I could say to my students, what would you say if you were a leader in your area and one of your employees came up to you and said, I'm seriously considering quitting. This job is so terrible and nobody treats me with respect around here. Okay, how are you going to respond? Let different people give their idea to script it. In nursing, what I do is I say, okay, a physician has come up to you and is angry at you because of something that happened that another nurse did. How are you going to handle that? What are you going to say? And you can do all kinds of, conflict is a really good thing to do scripting because some of the students in the millennial generation, they don't really have good examples of how to respond to people who are picking on them. I mean, you can even use bullying as an example for this, or people in conflict with them, things that are changing, stress. And if we can script for them, let me give you an example of how you can say something. Then we can get them thinking about something besides the book or the PowerPoints or whatever has been going through the class. So I think we could use that in a lot of areas. One thing we could do is have different people say, okay, now you give me a passive response to that situation. You give me an aggressive response to that situation. You give me an assertive response to that situation. Or in a leadership class, we could say, okay, you give me a transitional leadership response to that. You give me a dictatorial leadership response to that situation, and mix it up a little bit. That would help them learn those different things. Something that I stumbled upon when I was preparing to teach my research class was something called the 6 thinking hats. And I'm just going to play this little 2-minute thing. It basically describes the 6 thinking hats. And on the handout, I've put all the links to the videos that I've shown you. Oh, they're just laying up here in the front.
In 1985, a Maltese physician called Edward de Bono published a book called 6 Thinking Hats. The book described a powerful technique for looking at decisions from a number of important perspectives. The premise of the method is that the human brain thinks in a number of distinct ways, which can be deliberately challenged. If you look at a problem with the 6 Thinking Hats technique, then you will solve it using all approaches. Your decisions will mix ambition, skill, sensitivity, creativity, and good contingency planning. So, how do you use the tool? You can use 6 thinking hats in meetings or on your own. Each thinking hat is a different style of thinking. Let's have a look at what they each mean. When wearing the white hat, you focus on data. Study the information you have on the subject and see what you can learn from it. When you switch to the red hat, you'll look at problems using intuition and emotion, sometimes called gut feeling. Try to think how people will react to your decision emotionally. The black hat has you looking at all the bad points of the decision. This is important as it highlights the weak points in your plan. Switch to positive thinking when wearing the yellow hat. This will help you focus on the benefits of the decision and the value in it. This can be really useful when everything looks gloomy and difficult. The green hat is all about creativity. Let the creative juices flow and develop creative solutions to problems. Finally, the blue hat is about process control. When wearing this hat, you decide which hat is the most suitable for the stage of decision making. For example, if ideas are running dry, you may decide to switch to the green hat. By analysing your decision wearing the 6 different hats we've talked about, you can feel confident about your decision knowing you've considered all points of view.
So he suggests in this little video thinking about things with point of view. What I used it for was a research class. We had a research article. I gave everybody a little bit of time to read over the research article, and I actually had a friend make me hats out of newspaper, just crumpled up newspaper, with different flowers that matched the colors of the hats. And so each person had to give the viewpoint from the color of their hat for that article. So there were 2 or 3 students that were required to share the data, the facts of that article. There were 2 or 3 students that were required to share the negatives. Somebody else shared the creativity, the possibilities. And so we went around and had each little group share, and I have actually 21 hats that I use again semester after semester. You could even just take pieces of colored paper and make the little pointed hats like we used to when we were a kid that looked like a boat upside down. You could just make those, or have colored name tags, and everybody would have to know what viewpoint they were supposed to have. We could do this with an article from the newspaper. We could do this with some literary work that we're studying in an English class. There's a lot of ways you could use this, and of course he used it in a business situation. So that was kind of fun, and then at the end of the discussion we all got together and I took the student's picture, of course. Had to do that. Okay, then another area, another technique that I've used in the past is a reality check. So we're discussing whatever, pick something in your class, and we stop and we have a reality check. How would this look in the real world? Maybe in our class we're talking about something that's kind of pie in the sky, or the ideal of what something would be. So what does this look like in real day? How would this look in modern day if we're talking about something from the Old Testament? How would this look in a modern day situation? How would some of the things change but keep the story the same? Or how does this situation relate to your, or affect your role? So maybe your role is a leader, maybe your role is a writer, maybe your role is a musician, or a preacher, or a teacher. How does that affect whatever we've talked about? How does that affect your role? So we could use that for lots of different kinds of things as well. Any questions so far, or comments, suggestions? All right, pass the problem. So maybe there's a problem. You're in human resources and business, or you're a leader, or you're a preacher. Let's do preacher, that's always real interesting. So you're a preacher and there's a problem with one of the people in your church. And they don't like the way we do music in the church. So we would all take out a piece of paper and each of us would write at the top what this lady's complaint is about the music. Or if we were doing it in an employee situation, for education it's a good idea. If you're a teacher in a 5th grade class and you have a discipline problem in your class, how are you going to handle that? So we each write a different discipline problem at the top of our piece of paper, and then we pass it to the right. And the guy on the right has to write a solution to that. And then we pass it to the right again. And the next guy has to write a different solution to that problem. Or maybe in a nursing class, I might have a patient with a high heart rate. And I would say, everybody write a reason for a high heart rate on the top of your paper, because there's lots of reasons. pass it to the right. How are we going to deal with that? What are we going to do about it? Pass it to the right again. You can't write down what the guy before you wrote down. So that means you have to read all the ones before. So I'd go through that a couple, 3 or 4 or 5 times, depending on what the topic was. And then we could discuss those. So they're kind of working individually, but in a group, in a way. And they have to think about what somebody else put down on that paper. So suggested strategies to handle a problem. So that's past the problem. And then sometimes we can do it in a giant Post-it note format. In nursing, some of us really like giant Post-it notes. I've put one over here, and then there's another one over here. So I would maybe write up something from last class that was a thing we talked about here, and I'd write one on that one, and this one, and several around the room. Okay, so when we teach electrolytes, Jessica could do this in her class, so I could put low potassium here, high potassium there, low sodium, high sodium on all my Post-it notes around the room. And then I could have, depending on the number of students in the class, I could have 2 people go up and write one thing you remember about low sodium here. And somebody else is at the low potassium, and somebody else is at the low phosphorus. And everybody in the class would be out of their seat, write down one thing, give them just a real short time, and then everybody move to the right, go to the next poster. Write something else down on that poster, not that somebody else wrote down. So the people who are at the end of the line really have to think. It's better to do it in pairs, not individually, because it gets pretty stressful towards the end of the rotation. I've done this with EKGs. I'll put certain kind of tachycardia on this one, and a certain kind of slow heart rate on that one, and a lethal one on this one, and another lethal one on that one, and we'll go around and see what they remember from the class before. And then I leave them up for a couple of, till the test, and let them see those when they come in. A lot of them, you know what they're going to do. They're going to walk around and take pictures of all of them, which is fine. There's nothing sacred on there. And then before the test, of course, I have to take them down. So that's just a little quick review, but it makes them stand up, it makes them move around. It doesn't, you can cut it off, you know, if you don't want everybody to hit every one of the Post-it notes, you don't have to do that. Maybe just give everybody 5 of them or something to do. So it's kind of like pass the problem, only you're standing up, walking around. So now what I'd like for you to do is really truly to stand up, right where you are, smush in together and put your arms around each other. And I want you to start swaying. Sway back and forth. Sway.
You rescued me so I can stand and sing. I am.
Oh, I'm going to be up here.
There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, 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 to break every chain. He breaks every chain, he breaks every chain, he breaks every chain. We're no longer slaves, we're no longer slaves, we're no longer slaves. He broke every chain, we're no longer slaves, we're children of God. You set the sea so I can walk right through.
you. Have a seat.
Don't be bragging about that, because not all of us can sing.
So I did that last week, and all I was trying to do was get them off their feet. I didn't want to let them go out in the hall for a break. I just wanted to stand up, you know, like stretch your legs, only in a sort of a creative way. So I had 2 students up here in the front with me, made everybody do what you guys did, and God hijacked it.
All right.
You know how that happens, right? So I'm standing up here, I'm thinking we just need a break, that's all. And we're swaying back and forth, and all of a sudden I realized everybody's smiling. They're all smiling, and they're touching each other, right? And so I started having eye contact with each student, because I was in the front. Each student individually. Little eye contact throughout a couple of them started singing, some of them started closing their eyes and worshiping. That was 2 minutes, that's all I did. I started in the middle of the song. And so God totally hijacked it. It was really exciting. So I got more than I bargained for in that little break. So I would highly recommend that. It was very fun. So that's my music stretch break. I went to a conference last year, and one of the things that they suggested for a technique would be 2 truths and 2 untruths. So if we have a poem that we're studying, and we've all supposedly read it, or a book that we should have read, a story, whatever. So each person, or maybe 2 people together, get a little piece of paper and write down 2 truths and 2 untruths about that poem, about that story, about that article, about the concept that we studied in class, and try and stump each other. And so then I would let some people share and try and stump each other and see how they did with that. Then another thing I've done is have them come up to the board or to my Post-it note and have 2 groups write theirs down. So then I would have 8 things up here mixed together, maybe in one person's handwriting. And then as a group, we discuss those things. Which are truths, which are untruths, and why. And hopefully if you do this a couple times, they'll get better at doing the untruths and not so obvious on the truths. So we've had a lot of fun with that. And then the other thing I do with that, in nursing, one of the things in our test questions is we have select all that apply questions. And so what you can do is take their 8 things, or 6 of their 8 things, and make it into an exam question. Because we have multiple answers on a select all that apply, it just has to be 2 or more correct answers. And so if I have 3 truths and 3 untruths, that meets the requirements for that question, and they can help me write test questions. So I really like that. And then when they do that in their little groups, I always collect those papers afterwards because they can stimulate me writing test questions. Yes, sir?
So I love that idea. I don't give exams. I have them all write weekly critical engagement papers. But those are, I write questions for those. How would you adapt would you do this, if they're trying to do critical engagement, how could you adapt that idea into a writing prompt?
Writing, give me an example. Writing from what? Scripture?
Not necessarily.
You teach theology.
I do. So scripture's not involved. I'm just kidding.
That's an untruth.
Yes. So, for example, last week we were talking about atonement paradigms and what does it mean that when Jesus dies on the cross, how does that fix sin? Is it a punishment? Is it a ransom? Is it all these sorts of things? And I wrote, my question for this past week was, compare and contrast the 4, which is a pretty elementary question as far as questions go, but they also have to know it to do it, so it's fine. But how could I adopt what you just described into a writing prompt for this 1-page critical engagement, single space, so it's fairly lengthy, critical engagement?
Anybody have an idea?
I do. I mean, what if we, for every true theological idea, there are lots of heresies out there. And what if you presented okay, here's the idea. Pick out one erroneous thought that is popular today and describe how people believe that and then answer it. And then you could get lots of different worlds.
Oh, he's writing that down. He really likes that.
You have to be able to identify what was right and what was
That's right.
wrong.
And
right?
articulate it
Yeah.
clearly.
Bring it
Chances
in.
are you have people in the class going, I didn't know that was wrong.
So you make that into an essay question. You could still give the untruth. You could even say it's an untruth, but they would have to identify it. Or maybe you don't even identify it. Maybe you could put statements that people make, and then you would have them respond to that statement, and as they respond to it, they would indicate whether they knew that was a truth or an untruth and why. I could do that in nursing or in science classes. We could make a statement about something, a statement about the function of the pancreas. I could make a statement about a medication or some disease or whatever, and then have them refute or support. That's called rationale. We do that all the time in science, rationale. And you do that in theology too, you do rationale. So that's basically what you're having them write down is the rationale. All right, success. We could do 2 truths and 2 untruths about Renaissance literature. We could do 2 truths and untruths about the Krebs cycle. You could do that. I'm not going to do that. You love the Krebs cycle, I bet. No, you don't. We could do that 2 truths and untruths about a person, like Queen Esther or Steve Jobs or Michelangelo or whoever you happen to be studying, or an event in history. You know, we're studying the Civil War, 2 truths and 2 untruths about the Civil War. So there are lots of places we could go with that. Lots of places. Another technique I used last week, I just kind of made this up because somebody else stole my class. But I had a plan, and I found out in the morning that somebody else was doing that in their class with those same students that morning. So I'm like, what am I going to do? So this is my research class, so I just made this up. A research sprint is what I call it. So I let them pick an article. I had the links posted in Moodle because I'd already had them beforehand. And let each of them pick an article that they were slightly interested in, and I varied the topics. I gave them 10 minutes to read it, and then I said, you share 3 pearls of wisdom from that article. Only 3. So then I took them out to the front steps. We went outside. It was a beautiful day. And I said, now, you have to pay attention because you have to be respectful to your classmates. I don't want you just, gazing off into the trees and everything. And they did a really pretty good job. One student started to explain what the article was about. And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. You only get 3 pearls of wisdom to share about that article. And so the whole thing took maybe 30 minutes, even, the 10-minute reading and then the sharing time. Just didn't take very long at all. And they got a wide variety. You could tailor it to whatever you had just been talking about, maybe the week before. It didn't have to be a research article. It could be something else, a section of the textbook if you want to go there, but I wouldn't recommend that. I'd recommend some other kind of resource. So it turned out to be kind of fun. So I have to thank that person that stole my class.
So was it just everybody read the same article?
Nope, everybody had a different article.
Different one.
Mm-hmm. This is my research class, so I had a different article.
You had to, right? You made sure each person did a different one.
I put them up and I said, who wants this one, who wants this one, who wants this one? I selected the articles. Yes, ma'am, I certainly did. So we had some, I had some articles about cancer, some mental health articles, some obstetrics articles, some health promotion, smoking cessation, all kinds of things mixed in there. So we covered a lot of ground that day. I like to also have students be teachers in the class. I'll tell you that you need to be careful with that because 2 things. One is you need to validate the content that they're sharing. You need to be sure it's correct, especially if you're going to test over that material and you're not really going to talk about it. Love to have students give quick reports, discussions, whatever you want to call them, to mix things up so that I'm not the one up there talking like Charlie Brown's teacher all the time. And they're smart, and we're training them to be leaders and resource people, and so there's no reason they can't do that. But validate the content, and then what I find they tend to do is they tell way too much. They go way too deep. And so I have to, at the end, I have to summarize it and pull it back to what are the salient points. What should you focus on in what your wonderful classmate just shared? We always clap, of course. And hopefully they'll do a little creativity. A lot of them like to go out to Pinterest and pull up some silly little cartoon, which is perfectly fine. It's an easy way to remember things. But then we have to focus it down. So those are the two things. Make sure it's a valid information, correct, and then focus it in for them.
Do you distribute those to the rest of the students, or?
I let them bring copies or post stuff on Moodle,
Okay.
so that they can use it to study with later. And I make sure that I ask at least one test question from somebody's little report so that they know that they still have to look at that information. And it makes them feel good when it's theirs. I try and rotate it around, not let the same person always be. Because they watch your exam. When I do that, they watch my exams to see whose stuff got on the exam.
Yeah.
Okay, another little video that I want to share with you is about teamwork. What did you think of that? Isn't that weird? Did you get it? So it's a video about leadership, teamwork, but I think there's other things you could talk about too with that. There was communication in there with no words whatsoever. And you could even talk about the physical health of people as they don't have food. So you could talk about starvation and what happens to people. There was some bullying going on in there. There was compassion. There are all kinds of things you could talk about with that one little video. It was only 2 minutes long. When you show videos in class, don't make them really long. Because they won't, if it's longer than a music video that they would listen to at home, you're going to lose interest after about 4 or 5 minutes. So you have to be careful about that. So anything that you can pull in, I showed that for 2 minutes. We could talk about it for 3 minutes, and that would be a 5-minute break in the middle of our discussion about compassion, or about caring for other people, or about the psychology of caring for other people. Lots of different things. 5 minutes. And then move on to whatever the next topic is. Another thing that I haven't done, but I'm getting ready to try, is a day in the life of. So a day in the life of a depressed person. A day in the life of a human resources manager. A day in the life of a Cherokee Indian leader from pick a time period. A day in the life of Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. You could do it with literature. A day in the life of a preacher. How does it feel to be a preacher all day long? Is it a happy, wonderful job? Not from my experience. What are the stresses? How do they handle things? So you could do a day in the life of a diabetic patient. All kinds of things. And have the students put themselves in the shoes of that person to get a look around inside their life, what their life is like. That would require us to talk about feelings, about stress, about strategies and coping, and gosh, all kinds of things could come out in that kind of a discussion. And you could limit it to 5 minutes. It wouldn't have to be a 20-minute discussion or even half of a class. You could do it in 5 minutes. And if you didn't want them all to be out loud, I could assign a group of you. You do this, a day in the life of, and you two do this one, talk to each other and share with each other. You be quiet while she talks, and then you make 2 comments about what she just said. And we could all learn from that. There's no right or wrong answers in those situations, so that's why you don't have to share it with the whole group. And maybe you could just pick on 1 or 2 students and ask them to share what their buddy got out of it. That shows that they were listening, or not. The or not is always the prize.
Okay.
So, the other thing I like to do is give a prize for the day. Someone who made a really great comment, or a great suggestion, or asked a great question. And it doesn't have to be a big prize. A banana, a granola bar, a cookie. So I'm going to give the prize to you because of the way you answered his question, which was such a good idea. And so now when you come to my class the next time, is anybody else going to want a prize the next time you come to class? Who is she going to give a prize to today, and what is it going to be?
So do you do this for every class?
I randomly do this. I don't want them to expect it. I don't want them to expect it.
In a bigger class, would you do maybe more than one? Or
What I would do, what I like to do is target people. If I know someone's been struggling with the material and they make a really good point, or they ask a really sharp question that shows me that they're really thinking about it, then that's who I'm going to give the prize to. Or maybe I know a student's been struggling in their personal life for some reason. So I use it kind of as a pick-me-up in a way, but also to stimulate discussion about a topic. Because you don't want to give it to the smart people all the time. That gets really old for the people who don't feel like they're smart.
Come on. Sorry if it was strongly about this.
well, that was what I was getting at there. I mean,
I would even a large class, I probably would just do one. I wouldn't even do it once a day. Really, once a class, just one maybe, but probably not. And unless you think that you want to build it up, I'd mix it up. If you do one week, maybe 2 the next week, maybe none the week after that. It has to be random. It has to be random.
Do your students, have they been able to detect that you're giving it to the people that need pick-me-ups? Or are you so good at it, like, yeah, that was a good
Well,
one
I haven't done this for very long, but a lot of times they won't notice that. In a smaller class, when they're so close anyway, I don't know that nobody said anything. Nobody said anything. But I suppose they might.
They'd probably like it that you were doing it that way.
Maybe.
For your classes.
Maybe. Now, I don't do it, it's not lame. You know, if I give you a prize, it's not because you said something really lame and I feel sorry for you today. All right? It has to be a good thing you said. And sometimes I'll do it near the beginning of class, and sometimes I'll kind of wait later on. And I'll say, I think that you made a really good point. When we were talking about XYZ, you're the prize winner for today. Because I kind of waited to see what else would happen in the class, because I've been really worried about Barbara, and I wanted to see if she was going to say something worthy of a prize, and She didn't come up with anything today, or maybe Barbara's a really quiet person, and she shared a really great example from her life about this situation, and I'll give her the banana. Sorry. I'm not an Indian giver, that was just an example. So if it's a quiet person and they, you know, they share something really significant, that's who I'd give the banana to. Can't always pick the quiet people though, because the smart ones who are vocal never get the prize. You can't do that. And in a big class, by the time we get to the end of the semester, is everyone going to have a prize? No way. Can't. Can't. It's just the way it is. That's the way life is. Everybody doesn't get a trophy. Not in education anyway. Not in education. All right, so analogies. Can you see my picture? This is for my scientist. What is this a picture of?
Twinkies.
Twinkie on the top. What's on the bottom?
Chloroplast.
Chloroplast. Can you make an analogy how a Twinkie is like a chloroplast? Anybody?
It's full of sugar. Or energy.
Okay, energy.
Full of things you can't identify.
There's an outer and an inner core.
Okay, there's an outer membrane, the plastic on the Twinkie. And by the way, it's called a chloroplast. So that can help you remember the name. And there's a filling inside the Twinkie, and isn't there a filling inside the chloroplast? That's the chlorophyll. So the filling is the chlorophyll, and it's about the chloroplast. Now, I didn't make this up. I read about this. Some student made it up in their presentation. But sometimes just making analogies between common things, and it helps them remember facts that you want them to remember. So I thought that was a pretty fun one, the whole Twinkie thing. All right, now I have another video that I want to show you.
When I first went to a slum, the adults say that we don't have any time to listen to all this because we know nothing will happen. So we try to organize the children, make them peer educators or group leaders so that they can bring about changes within their own community.
তবে কি আমার মনে হয় যে অনেক বাড়ি আছে যারা হয়তো থাকে না, তারা হয়তো দিনের কাজে যায়, রাত্রিরে ফেরে, তো তখন কিন্তু তাদের বাড়িতে কিন্তু বাচ্চা আছে, অথচ সেই বাচ্চাটাকে নিয়ে কাজে যায়, অথচ তার বাড়িতে লিখে গেল পি আর ডেট দিয়ে গেল, অথচ সেই বাচ্চাটা পালস পোলিও খেয়েছে, আদৌ কি সে পেয়েছে না। তাহলে এই যে গ্যাপগুলো রয়ে যাচ্ছে, কিন্তু এই যে গ্যাপ, এটাও দেখো খুব মজার। ধরো এই যে এই গ্রুপে কে কে আছে, তারা কি করলো, এ গ্রুপে গিয়ে পুরো অ্যাওয়ারনেস করলো, যেটা হচ্ছে দেখবে যারা অটো করে বলে তাদের অনেক টাকা মাইক ভাড়া করে, ব্যাটারি ভাড়া করে, তারপরে তো বলে, কিন্তু আমরা যারা কাজ করছি আমাদের কাছে কত টাকা আছে, আমাদেরকে বলে চোঙা। কি বলে? চোঙা।
আগামী রবিবার রামধারী বাবুর ক্লাবে পালস পোলিও টিকা খাওয়ানো হবে। আপনারা সবাই আপনাদের বাচ্চাদের নিয়ে যাবেন। একটা হাত যদি মানুষের এমনি থাকে, সে জীবনে আর কি করতে পারবে, বিশেষ কিছু করতে পারবে না। তো আমাদের মতো এটা আমাদের পাড়ার কোনো ছেলে এমনি না হোক,
আজকে যদি মনে হয় যে না, তাহলে এরা আছে, এরা হচ্ছে এলাকায় কাজ করছে, ঠিক আছে, এদের তুমি বলতে পারো যদি তোমার সেরকম কাজের অসুবিধা হয়, তাহলে ওরাই তোমার ওই বাচ্চাটাকে ক্লাবে নিয়ে যাবে, ওরা পালস পোলিও খাইয়ে নিয়ে আবার এখানে ফেরত দেবে, ঠিক আছে।
টাটা করে দে, টাটা করে দে, টাটা।
previously there was, around 40% of the children, they go to the vaccination center. Now they are at least 80% people. And within 2-3 years, I think that all of RSE children will be vaccinated.
আমরা চাইছি যে আমাদের কাজটা এর দিয়েও বৃহৎ হোক। আমরা স্কুলে যাচ্ছি, তো মানে আমরা একদিন বেরিয়ে যতটা করতে পেরেছি 75টা বাচ্চাদের 100 জন হয়েছে। তারা নিজেরা কেন নিয়ে আসছে না, তাদের ছেলে মেয়ে, আমাদেরও ভাই বোন, আমাদেরও বলার কর্তব্য বলেই আমরা বলছি। আর যদি আমাদের বলে তোদের এতে সার্থক কি, আমাদের ভাই বোনেরা যাতে প্যারালাইজ না হয়, খোড়া না হয়ে যায়, এটাই আমাদের সার্থক। আমাদের ভাই বোনদের আমরা ভালো করবো।
So what could we use that as a discussion forum for? What can we talk about in relation to that, besides polio? That's the obvious one. Empowering youth, how to do that.
How they brought the community together.
So collaboration.
Just solving practical problems.
Problem solving.
Parents wouldn't take their kids just because they had to watch the children. They couldn't take time off.
Mm-hmm.
Solve that problem and you can,
We'll take them.
yeah.
Now, one little guy's going to be the next leader of
That's
the
exactly
World
what I was
Health
thinking.
Organization.
He actually is. There are some other videos that go with this that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have made. And this little guy that got so passionate about the whole thing, and a girl that also became a leader in that, they've come to the United States and done TV shows and interviews about this whole process that they did. The little guy said, at one point, he said, it's our duty. What's
Care for our
duty?
brothers and sisters.
What's duty? Who told him that was his duty? Where did he get that from?
He just assumed the ownership. He just took it and ran with it.
Right. So we could talk about the word duty. We could talk about the culture in the slums in India. That would be a great way to do that. We could do all kinds of cultural things. And then we could always talk about polio and what happens if you don't take the vaccine and what happens if you do take the vaccine and the different kinds of vaccines and when they should give them and when they shouldn't give them. So we could go crazy with that. I found that a couple of years ago when I was teaching leadership. And I actually ended up having them write a paper about it with specific questions. And it was very interesting. The students loved the video. They thought it was a great video. And it's 5 minutes long. That's my limit on showing a video in class. They had to watch it on their own for my assignment that I had them do, and then write their paper and submit that. I did not show it in class like I did to you all today. Thank you for coming. I hope that you saw something that you could use, heard something that you could use. In summary, a wrap up, as Jean Elledge would do, a wrap up, right? Mix it up. Our ultimate goal is to get the students to share and think. And if we stand up here and talk the whole time, that's not going to happen. And just the little 5-minute things, just throw them in there, 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.